Hey church, Evan Chase with the February 2025 One Mission update. And I think I'm just going to share one story from last month. There's a lot of things I could share, but it always takes too long. But one significant story that I do want to share. And it really is, in many ways, a huge answer to prayer. For those of you who know me from California and have any history of me, or maybe you know this, now that majority of my marriage, my wife, Annie, has been ministering inside the four walls, and I've kind of been outside the four walls. Not 100%, there's been some spillover, but predominantly that's been our dynamic. And so when God called us to Tennessee, I knew the hand of the Lord was in it. I didn't know what it was going to look like, but one of the things I asked for back in California, so those of you back in California know this, was that God would continue to unite Annie and I in ministry. Little did I know, God was going to rekindle a 30-year-old call for church planting. That I did not know. But the desire for unity in ministry context was something that I was asking prayer for. Well, fast forward, as you know, if you're listening to this video, God has opened the door and sent us on a path to explore the ministry of One Mission, becoming One Mission Church. And last month, a significant shift happened. And I do got to say that for the past year and a half, as we started this stepping out in faith towards possibility of One Mission Church, I began to see seeds of God uniting my wife and I. But last month, I think, was a significant shift forward. So as you know, or if you've been listening to these videos, you know that we went to a church planters assessment. This is the end of 2024, Annie and I, and they assessed us as potential church planters. And the church and ministry that sent us wanted to do a follow-up. And there's been multiple delays. So middle of February, we finally had our follow-up meeting on our church planting assessment. And this was to assess if we are to move forward or not, kind of what is the Lord saying. So we had the senior pastor. I asked that his wife come because I wanted a female to be able to connect with Annie, not just to be a whole, male-dominated conversation, because having a wife at the table, I think, is really important, because she would understand my wife more than any of us, of course. So the pastor's wife, and then the guy, Dave Coley, who went with us to Virginia on the assessment, was at the follow-up meeting as well. So the three of us and Annie and I sat at the table at a coffee shop, and it was awesome. The conversation, 3/4 of it was with my wife, of which I was thrilled. And part of it was they just wanted to get to know my wife. They've seen me in these classes. So this first class that I went through training, it was pretty much all, not even pretty much, it was all me. So they had heard about my wife, but hadn't really met her. So it was wonderful. So I got a chance to kind of share what the Lord put on my heart for One Mission Church. And they also got a chance to listen to Annie. One of the challenges I said right up front, I said, you guys, if I can cut to the chase, here's the challenge that we're up against to move forward. And it's this: I feel called and Annie doesn't, right? Like, how do you handle that? So we had a really good conversation, and they just spent a lot of time listening and talking to Annie and encouraging her and really listening. And after some time, the senior pastor, Dave Clayton, who I really respect, him and his wife, their whole team is pretty awesome. But after listen, he basically says this. He said, we want to do what's best for the two of you. And he said, if I didn't think moving forward was the best for you two, I'd tell you. And he said, and I have before. And I would do it because I think it's the best, because I want God's will for you as best I can discern, right? And encourage you in that. And he said, but after listening all this time, and he says, I know Evan, and we've had, many conversations, and he's taught my classes for the church plant process. But he says, after listening to Annie, he said, I think you're more on the same page than you realize. And that was awesome to hear from an outsider who knew my wife for 45 minutes, just asking questions and discerning and listening. And he's discerning with a purpose, right? He's trying to discern how to encourage us in the Lord's will. And so in 45 minutes for him to pick that up just from mostly listening to Annie, and that's his feedback, was powerful. Now, I've seen bits and pieces of it, so I see this, but to have an outsider say it versus me say it is significantly different. So he said, I'm going to recommend that both of you take this next and final season with Onward. That's their ministry that does the church planting training. And you do this together. There's some hurdles with work, and he said, I will help you with all that. But I think the next kind of best step for the two of you would to do this together, the next season, the final season. He said, and I'll say this, that doesn't guarantee that you have to do a church plant afterwards. So there's room to continue to explore. But he says, I think you're more on the same page than you realize, and I think that would be the next best step. So I'm looking at Annie, and inside I am rejoicing. And I got to tell you, there was moments in that meeting where I was like, my heart was racing. I was like, this is not going to happen. They don't get it. Oh my gosh, why do you have me here, Lord? And so I'm wrestling with the Holy Spirit, all the way through this meeting. But that was his summary. And then on the drive home, Annie and I agreed that would be the next best step. She reached out to her office. They gave her the time off. They said, not a problem. That was one of the hurdles. We weren't sure how that was going to work. But they basically said, we got your back, you can do this and we'll support you. And that was, in a nutshell, that's what it is. That is the big moment, the big, I don't want to even say shift, because it hasn't been a shift. I feel like this is what Lord has been building together. But that was a huge moment to be able to move forward so that at some point, if Lord willing, we can both say, we would have different roles, of course, but God has called us to this. And then I'll end with this. The cool thing, too, is after Annie got the approvals from her boss, because, take a little bit of time off to go to the training, not a lot, but a little bit. She followed up with a text to the pastor, thanking him, thanking his wife, and added kind of at the end, she says, I'm kind of excited. I'm kind of excited. So the dream after 30 years is not dead. And I can't tell you, I feel like a horse at the gates. Like I just want to run, but I know it's not time yet. But I tell you, I am so grateful to the Lord, and I'm trusting that his timing is perfect, that 30 years for him is nothing. But I see how he shaped me over 30 years of tears and crying and waiting and death, personal death in a good way, dying to self, dying to dreams, dying to a lot of things, submitting myself daily to the Lord and his will, being faithful right where he has it. Don't live in the future into some dream or some that may or may never ever come to play, but living in the moment, ministering to the people God is in my life today. That's how I've really trained myself to live. But I see the wisdom of God in what he's calling me to do, and how that is exactly the right perspective for me to lead from for what he wants us to do. I hope that makes sense. So I'm looking forward to, I hope there's going to become a time where I'm going to invite some of y'all to come hear in much more detail what God has called us to do. And I promise you, we're going to open up the Bible and you're going to see what God has called us to do. It's nothing new. It's actually something very old. And it's going to come right out of the scriptures. But it's going to look very different in many ways to the modern shape of how churches functions today. So there's many souls to win, and that's what I'm about. For 30 years, that also has been my focus, that all I care about is the lost. And that will be a theme that all of us will champion together, that we live our lives, we empty our lives on behalf of those who don't know Jesus. It's called this Great Commission. So that's it. Thank you for your support. Financially, I just got to say, I got to say it every time, I guess, that we're living on faith. We came out here and we're living on faith financially, and it's through many of you who have supported One Mission that we're making it month to month. We're about $2,500 in the hole every month, and that's kind of humbling to say, but supernaturally God has provided every month. And so we're very dependent, very needy, and just continuing to trust the Lord on Him and God's people, you all. So thank you. And that's it. That's the update. More to come as it unfolds. I'll talk to you guys, well, some of you sooner than later, but if nothing else, I'll give you the update of what's going on March 2025. God bless you guys.